Hello, BookTube. Well, as you've probably seen on the news, if you live in the United States, a walloping great snowstorm is bearing down on the Northeast here in the United States. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, a whole bunch of cities up and down the eastern seacoast are now under a winter storm watch. I think the storm's name is Gale. I think we're naming all of our storms now, but one way or another, the models that I was talking about yesterday that showed a kind of variance are now pretty much agreeing that Boston is going to get hammered. That the storm is going to start well after sundown tonight and continue all night long and continue all day tomorrow. So who knows what that will be like. But I thought, since I need no real prompting to stock up on books, I thought that's a perfect opportunity. That's a perfect excuse to stock up on books. I had an appointment in downtown Boston early this morning, first thing this morning. It put me right within striking distance of the Brattle bookshop, which is a used bookstore in Boston that I just love. I've talked about it many times on this channel. It's got all the things that you would want of a great used bookstore, including its own personalized postcards on the inside. And then on the outside, it's got a whole lot, the floor plan of an entire building, full of bargain books. $1, $3, and $5 bargain books, not organized in any way. Just a book browser's paradise out there. Someday, in a perfect future world, I look forward to browsing out there with each and every one of you. That would be so wonderful. I think you'll agree, right, that you've probably experienced it yourself. There's nothing better than book browsing with another book person. Because if you break off and just sort of quietly do your own thing, separate from everybody else, another book person is not going to take offense at that, whereas a non-book person will. If you're at a great stuffed used bookstore with a non-book person, sooner or later, usually sooner rather than later, usually 30 minutes or something barbaric like that, they're going to come wandering over to you and somewhat diffidently say, "So, all set?" That is just insane. That doesn't make any sense at all. The book person, you're not going to have to worry about that. Sooner or later, somehow, I dream about shopping at the Brattle outdoor carts, maybe in late spring when it's beautiful and we have all the time in the world, maybe with Frida with me, so that I don't even have to be thinking about her. Someday, I dream about doing that with each one of you, but today I had to do it on my own. And it was blissful. And it was extra blissful because of that thin fig leaf of justification. It's always nice when you're indulging in something like this. It's always nice to feel like you're a little justified. And I was thinking about the storm. The storm is coming. It won't be possible, for instance, this time tomorrow to browse at the Brattle outdoor carts. They won't be out. It might not be possible the day after that, depending on how much snow falls, depending on how much shoveling there is to do and whatnot, depending on how fast the snow goes away. For the last 4 or 5 years, well, for Frida's lifetime, Frida's almost 4 years old, and for her lifetime, there has been nothing like this. Whereas right before her lifetime, right before she was born, we did have a couple of winters in a row here in Boston where there were bands of severe snow. One winter in particular with my dear old girls, where we seemed to get a blizzard every other day. You get a blizzard, then you'd barely get time to take a breath, and then it would snow for 24 hours again. And that was also a cold winter, so the snow just kept accumulating. It didn't go anywhere. That was somewhat challenging when you had 2 rickety old dogs, one of whom, my pointer, Malin, by that point, her hind legs were just noodles. They were just water. They were good for as kind of a rudder to keep her basically on target once she was walking. And her side muscles and her front legs could do all the work, but they weren't good for anything else, certainly not for power. I had to get her up on her feet, and I had to keep her going. And if the ground was uneven, no, that wasn't going to work. If the ground was slippery, no, that wasn't going to work. And if there were mountains of snow, no, that wasn't going to. I remember that winter was pretty tricky, and Frida hadn't yet been born then. But in the time that she's been alive, Boston has had very mild winters. As bitterly cold as they might feel for me, they have been fairly mild. Tonight and tomorrow is going to be the kind of snowstorm that Frida has not yet seen. And I'm not sure how well it's going to go over with her. Uh-oh. Oh, has the king died? Is that the reason for all the horn honking and all the noise out there? Has the king died? Oh no, looking out, I see that it's not that the king has died, it's that the United States is up to its literal eyeballs in a-holes. Okay. All right. Oh, that's a kind of explanation. So anyway, I went to the Brattle first thing this morning to stock up on books and to talk to the staff, and I had a great time, and I got a bunch of books that I want to show you, and I'm hoping that this video is a little bit less annoying on a technical level. On a personal level, there's nothing I can do about the level of annoyance. But on a technical level, yesterday, one of you pointed out it sounded like there was a woodpecker here in the room. Yeah, because the camera, for some reason, was doing a rat-a-tat-tat Morse code right alongside what I was saying. Can't for the life of me figure out what is going on here. I have separated this camera from anything that could cause vibrations. And yet, there were vibrations yesterday. And I don't know, maybe there are vibrations today. I will figure this out. If this filming location doesn't work, if there's nothing I can do to stop, I've stopped the bobbing of the camera, but if there's nothing I can do to stop the, some sort of resonance from happening somehow, then I'll just have to come up with another filming location. That's all. This has a bit of old town familiarity to it because we've done so many videos with this kind of a backdrop, but I don't want noise in my videos, so I'll have to figure that out next year if I make videos next year. But in the meantime, I thought I'd show you the books that I got. It's a great variety. It's not that many books, so it shouldn't take that long. The first one is a photo essay book, heavy on the photos, light on the essays, of a subject that I love, near to my heart. The subject is the public library, your public library. I am a member in good standing, a very long-term good standing member of a private library here in Boston. But public libraries have had my heart forever, just forever. And in the pre-internet era, in the pre-laptop computer era, I spent huge amounts of time there, even though I had loving, caring dogs waiting for me at home. Not just out of inclination, although I had that inclination. There's nothing like getting a lot of work done at a public library, but also out of necessity. Before laptop computers and before the internet, I had to go to the library to get any kind of work done. To get a large amount of the work done that I had to do, I had to go there. And as a consequence, I fell in love with them. Now, the private library that I belong to here in Boston, I definitely also love. but public libraries, I found this thing. This is photographic essays by Robert Dawson, and it's just called The Public Library. And it is full of beautiful color photos of public libraries all over the country. I'm just at random picking up the Athenaeum of St. Johnsbury, Vermont. That is the only picture of any library in Vermont, as far as I can see. And there's one great picture of the back end of a library in Iowa, where I have actually been. Let me see if I can find it. It's a pretty telling picture. Oh, look at this one. That is the library in Death Valley. They put a roof over it to in some way protect it from the glaring heat of the hottest place in the world. And according to the caption, it's the only library for hundreds of miles. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. This is Garwin, Iowa. Not the front of the library, the one-room library in Garwin, Iowa, but the back. That's what the back entrance to the library looks like. That's kind of an inspired choice to take a picture of the back. And I was flipping through this thing on my way back here, just flipping at random. And when I was flipping through it, I wasn't reading the captions. I was just flipping through it, taking a look at all the different appearances of these buildings. And at one point, I turned to a spread of black and white pictures, and I saw that. And I didn't need to look at the caption, because that is the Boston Public Library. And over those doors in the middle are carved the words "Free to All." And the Boston Public Library, that is the old building, the old McKim Mead and White building, has Bates Hall, which is one of my favorite places in the entire world, is Bates Hall. Both the old Bates Hall, with its crappy lighting and no air conditioning, and also the new Bates Hall, which is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. All new green-shaded banker lamps on every thick wooden table, air conditioning, but of a slight and non-intrusive kind. I imagine often an alternate reality in which, I don't know, the necessary technologies did not exist. There is no there is no pragmatic excuse that I can give myself to go and spend hours working at a public library when I have a laptop that has the accumulated knowledge of the entire world at my fingertips instantaneously. There's no reason to go. The Bates Hall in the old public library is connected to the research branch of the Boston Public Library. It's a research library, a working library, so that you could, in days past, in decades past, I would go there researching a subject, and I would find it in the card catalog, and I would write out a call slip for a small stack of books, 4 or 5 books that aren't in general circulation, that cannot be taken out of the library, and that the research librarians would have to go and find in the stacks and bring to my desk. They were to bring it to my spot. I would give them my seat number. There's no reason to do much of that anymore, unless you're researching a book. For what I do in my writing and reading every day, the reasons to leave my dogs, who after all are not country dogs, they can't come and go as they please. They're not wandering around enjoying themselves and amusing themselves all day long. My dogs are in my apartment waiting for me. And that, leaving them like that, I often imagine a kind of alternate reality in which that isn't true, in which, God forbid, maybe I have cats who don't so much give a crap whether I'm home or not. I imagine I would spend a lot of time at Bates Hall in Boston Public Library. I imagine that would be true. Even though I would have a laptop, I would just bring a laptop. There's something magical about working with all those other people at those tables. And maybe that hypothetical reality will come down the line. Maybe that will come. When Frida is a little older, she will probably sleep all day and won't so much care whether I'm with her or not. It could be. It's happened to me in the past, but I had to get this. I don't imagine that I will hold on to it. I imagine that it is destined for the either personal or the professional collection of a certain library director that I happen to know. But in the meantime, I'll gladly glom over these pictures and, of course, keep a mental inventory of how many of these places I have been. But then we have an old kids book from 1915, and because the Brattle sale lot is the Brattle sale lot, this is actually a copy from 1915, because you never know what you're going to find out there. You definitely know one thing. You know that it isn't going to be just garbage. It isn't going to be the sale lot of, for instance, other used bookstores that might just somebody might just donate them the 15 last post-death Tom Clancy novels, and they're all out there. It won't be that. There was a block of a certain author out there today, but it was Joyce Carol Oates, and it was 2 whole shelves of Joyce Carol Oates that you could just get for a song, $40, and you'd have all of them. But this is The Lost Prince by Frances Hodgson Burnett, the author of The Secret Garden and Little Lord Fauntleroy. And I haven't read this in forever. God, forever. She wrote this book in 1915. I don't know much about her, biographically speaking. She visited Boston in 1879. I know that. And she met a lot of the literary lights of Boston when she was here. And she visited Boston a few more times after that because her son Vivian went to Harvard. And so she would occasionally come across the Atlantic to visit him, including one time when he was really ill and she was worried that he was going to die. And those visits always included flying trips to Boston, as visits to Cambridge, right across the river, Harvard University always do. But this is a story of a little boy. Did the king die? No? Oh, it's just a-holes again. Oh, okay. All right. This is a boy's book. This is a story of a little boy who is, unbeknownst to anybody, the rightful heir to a small, made-up European country. It's a very, very voguish thing to do right around this time, was to set large amounts of picaresque romance in little teacup European countries that characters made up. There was actually a successful series of books set in such a place called Graustark that set the mold, and that can still, sometimes that type of literature can still go by that name, Graustark novels. And this is that. There's a little boy who is unbeknownst to almost everybody at Princeling, and he is in exile, and he meets another young boy called the Rat. And the Rat is a weird character, definitely the standout fictional creation in this book, and probably of this author. lots and lots going on in the creation of this little boy, this fierce, opinionated, and yet oddly humble little boy. The dynamic between the two of them, the prince and the rat, is amazing. I remember it vividly, but I haven't read this in forever. I was amazed to see it at the Brattle. Gladly give it another read while the snow falls outside. Oh, I should also show you, since you might not come across the volume of this thing on your own, this is illustrated by Maurice Bauer. There is the prince and the rat. The front illustration is a little bit of a giveaway. It's a little bit of a what we would now call a spoiler. But let me show you a couple more pictures, because these are amazing. Look at the detail there. Look at the shading. Very, very nice. There's the prince being escorted away. There's the tiny little dog. That's the type I used to mock until I had one. That was one of only two of the made-up stories that I found today. There's another piece of fiction, but first we'll do some nonfiction, including this thing. I got a lot of good-natured sass via email. I leave my email on every video. That email is not to a merch store. That is not to a Gmail, a YouTube-provided mock account that I never check. That's my email. Feel free to email me at any time about any subject. The other day I was mentioning that I got a book on gardening, and I lamented that maybe all that fuss about me starting a garden might have ended up only getting me started on reading about gardening, and maybe I was never actually going to garden. I quoted from an old New Yorker cartoon that I just love about a woman who goes into a garden shop and wants to know, do all of these involve stooping? And a couple of you sent me, apparently, anti-stooping gardening, stooping-free gardening is a subset of the weird gardening world, and that it would be possible for me to garden, maybe indoors, without stooping. But one way or another, whether that ends up being true or not, my love of gardening literature has continued to grow. And not just literary stuff, but practical how-to stuff, which I find brings out a remarkable spare lyricism in people when writing about how to maintain a garden. I still enjoy reading those books. But this is not that. This is the American Gardener, a sampler, edited by Alan Lacey. Lovely thing here. That is, this is an anthology of gardening writing, American gardening writing, going back centuries, going back to colonial times. I'm pretty sure that I would have been interested in such an anthology anyway, even without a flirtation with gardening. I can't wait to dig into this. This is probably going to be one of those anthologies that acts as a doorway to a whole bunch of authors I didn't know, where I'm going to read their 2 pages on their begonias, and I'm going to look them up and realize that in addition to writing about gardening, they also wrote novels that I've never read. I can't wait. That's just fantastic. And I am slowly building a small shelf of gardening books. Anthologies, meditations, how-to, things like that. I am slowly doing that. So, and I don't regret it at all. Not at all. Then this next one is Uncanny. This is a case of the synchronicity of the Brattle sale carts especially. Brattle has an enormous buying ritual. They're constantly buying books. So they are not one of those used bookstores that I have loved. Maybe you have some that you have loved where the stock never changes, or changes so slowly that you really know everything that's there. And you can take your sweet time deciding what you want to buy and what you don't, because you know where it's going to be. The Brattle is not one of those used bookstores. Things change all the time, especially the outdoor carts. Those you never know. Not only is new stock brought out all the time, and old stock thrown away in the dumpster that's right there on the premises, so these books get to see the grim end coming. But also, even now in the time of pandemic, people like me still go to that sale lot and root around the sale lot. So they will dig down deep. They will find a book buried in a recess of a bottom shelf. They'll put it in their armload that they're walking around, and then when the ritual is that you build an armload of books, because these are so cheap. And then what people usually do, and myself included, is when you're done, when you've made your whole circuit of the $1, $3, and $5 carts, then you winnow. Then you look at all the books you have in your arm, and you say, okay, this one I don't really want. You put that back somewhere, but almost certainly not where you originally found it. Which means that the books are constantly mulching all over, so you can find things you didn't see before. But you can't command that. The synchronicity of the Brattle sale lot is such that you can hope for anything, but you can't expect anything. If you go there expecting things, you won't find anything. which has always led me to believe, that's why I've always said, for 50 years, I've said not I'll look for it at the Brattle, but rather the Brattle will provide. If I am not looking, if I am not coercing, if I am not trying to strong arm the gods at the Brattle, they will eventually throw in my path something that I actually have been looking for, that I actually want. And in this case, it was quick, because I mentioned the other day, I showed you Stephen Oates' book, With Malice Towards None, his biography, his one-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln. And I mentioned that I have a bunch of other books on Lincoln, but a lot of them are very specific to certain periods of his life, certain aspects of his life, rather than a soup to nuts biography. And when I was talking about Oates' book, I mentioned Carl Sandburg's famous 3-volume or multi-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln. It starts off with his prairie years, goes to his formative years, goes to his presidential years, his war years, all that sort of stuff. Ricky, what you doing? Come here. You want to see your fans? Ooh. You're about to get walloped with snow, little girl. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle snow? It's going to be taller than you are. It is. Ooh. What you doing? Careful there. When I was showing you that book, I mentioned that I didn't have Sandburg's book. Sandburg's book was made, it was a multi-volume set, and it was made into a 3-volume paperback box set that I had once upon a time, read until it fell apart. And there was a larger illustrated volume and a 2-volume set. But there was also a 1-volume abridgment that Sandburg did himself, and I found that today at the Brattle. Carl Sandburg's Abraham Lincoln. This is the 1-volume edition that cuts down quite a bit on, out of his monumental 6-volume work on Lincoln and his times, Carl Sandburg has written this definitive 1-volume biography. And it's amazing. It really is. It's incredible. It's extremely precisely done and overloaded on on its research. I think Sandburg probably guessed that a lot of people would consider him to be a bit of a showboat, a bit of a carpetbagger, famous. I really like this. As writing about Lincoln, I really like it, and I haven't read it in a long time. I haven't read any section of it in a long time. So, and I found it. So I will reinforce this a little, and then that'll do it for me for Lincoln until Sidney Blumenthal's next book. Sidney Blumenthal is writing a multi-volume history of Lincoln that I thought was going to be just so much treading water, but boy, oh boy, have those volumes been good. Boy, oh boy, and better as they go along, which is always something. That's always remarkable. Oh no, baby, if you touch that, it's going to rattle. I'm trying to avoid the rattling. Here, why don't you? Here. Oh, there you go. I forget where I was. I was hugging the baby. Well, anyway, now I have Sandburg's Lincoln, and the 1-volume is fine by me. I don't need the 8 volumes. So that's another Lincoln book that I found, and I can't think of. I have all of Harold Holzer. Harold Holzer is the author to find on Lincoln if you can. He's terrific, the best Lincoln writer that has ever been. But I don't need anybody else. I don't think I need anybody else. I don't need Beveridge's long series of books on Lincoln. I don't think I need anything other than that. Then we have the next book is the next novel, the other novel in our series here. This is a famous one, very, very famous. This was published in the 1960s, I believe. 1971. This came out in 1971. Historical fiction fans out there will probably know it. It's We Speak No Treason. By Rosemary Hawley Jarman with this, I don't remember what this is. I think this might be the way the book actually looked when it came out. It's vaguely stained glass look there with nothing on it. No folderol anywhere on it. No blurbs, no description of any kind on the jacket itself. Jacket itself just being artwork. This is a gigantic historical novel about Richard III because our author was imbibed on her mother's knee stories about Richard's innocence. That, if I remember correctly, that's how she dedicates the book. Yes, for my mother who told me the truth, which is that Richard is innocent. Although this is a work of fiction, the principal characters therein actually existed as part of a vast and complex 15th century society and had their recognized roles in history, sparsely documented though these may be. This is the author giving a slightly pretentious forward note that ends with the tomb at Greyfriars was sacked during the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII. The remains were disinterred and thrown into the River Soar. And by that she means also Richard's remains, because for centuries that's what people thought. They thought he was buried anonymously there, and when it was sacked, all of the bones were thrown just willy-nilly into the river, with nobody knowing at the time that that wasn't actually true in Richard's case, that his remains would eventually be found. Which is just astonishing. And a reminder that history is always with us. History's never done with us. You never know when history is going to reassert itself, when some bombshell is going to drop. But what Rosemary Hawley Jarman learned at her mother's knee was not the truth. It was Josephine Tay. That's what she learned at her mother's knee, was Josephine Tay, The Daughter of Time, a book trying to exonerate Richard from every single little speck of blame. The poor, misused, misunderstood bad boy of English literature who only wanted to be a loyal friend and brother and son and didn't want anything else. Why, a communion wafer wouldn't have dissolved in his mouth. And that's the Richard you get in this book. Very much so. And it's a sign of the author's dementia. I mean, benevolent, but still. This character, this weird, innocent version of Richard III, captures the imagination of certain people throughout the last century. And it happens regularly. And these people always seem to have... to have a couple of clothespins missing from the back line, if you know what I mean. And they always go about their task with absolute religious devotion and fly in the face not only of most of the recorded facts on the subject of Richard III, but also on everything they know about human nature. Richard III, the truth here is to exonerate him from blame in the death of his nephews, the rightful king and the rightful king's younger brother. It's to exonerate him in the death of the so-called princes in the Tower. That is the blame that, for instance, Josephine Tay goes at great length in Daughter of Time to exonerate him from the imputation of that crime. And this author does the same thing in the course of this book. That is the shadow from which she is trying to deliver her poor, misunderstood waif, is the shadow of having orchestrated and ordered the murder of his own nephews. These authors never dig much deeper in the record than that, or they would realize that they have a lot more work to do, because Richard didn't just orchestrate and order the death of his nephews. He also orchestrated and ordered the death of his brother, the death of actually two of his brothers, but one of his brothers was king when he did it. And he also orchestrated and ordered the death of his father. Richard III is one of the only characters in history, and certainly the only character in English history, who was responsible for the death of 3 kings, all of whom were related to him. He was an unmitigated black hole of a monster. He barely ever looked at anybody without trying to think whether or not he could get away with killing them. But no, he was misunderstood. And I haven't read We Speak No Treason in probably 40 years. I read it when it first came out, and I probably read it shortly after that, maybe in a mass market paperback, but not ever since then. And I remember really liking it, dorky and overwritten as it is. I remember really liking it, really enjoying it. So it was a treat to find it at the Brattle for nothing. So I will give it another try. To see how much I enjoy it as a novel. Not to see whether or not it changes my mind on one of the most pronounced homicidal maniacs in the history of the human race. No, not to see if it changes my mind on that. His brother Gloucester, his brother the king, his father, and his 2 nephews. And that is probably all that we just know about. Once you get a taste for that kind of thing, you keep doing it willy-nilly. Probably the list goes longer than that. But one way or another, the last book that I got, I'm sure that Richard will crop up in it, if I remember correctly. This is from, when is this? It's a gorgeous thing. The year 2000. I stocked this. I sold it. I had a copy once upon a time, even though it was expensive. Even with my employee discount, I still got it. But I haven't had it in a long time, and it is fantastic. Oh my, what a treat. And to get it for $1. Good Lord. It's this. The Spirit of Britain by Roy Strong. A huge artistic history of England. It's just full of... There's Thomas Wyatt. Did we open the Thomas Wyatt? We did. It's full of full color artwork on every page. Black and white artwork on every page. There's William Blake. With this artist taking you through the art, the architecture, the portraiture, the horticulture, everything. But also the sciences. This is basically a history of England in the last 1,000 years. And a sumptuous thing. Just beautifully done. The only defect with this volume that I found at the Brattle is that somebody had it, sun faded for just a bit, because that coloring used to be just as vibrant all the way around. But it doesn't matter to me at all. I showed you once at another Brattle haul just fairly recently, American Visions, which is an American version of this book. Extra big, extra heavy, because the heavy stock papers for all of the color illustrations. That was an artistic history of America that manages, like this book, to be also a history of America. And this is the equivalent for Britain. And I remember... the only thing that I really remember from this book is how much better a reading experience it was than I was expecting it would be. So I imagine that's only going to improve this time around. So there you go. Those are the books that I got in order to stock up for the storm. So we have The Spirit of Britain. We have The Public Library. We have, let's see here, We Speak No Treason, about Richard III. We have Carl Sandburg's Abraham Lincoln. How's that for the Brattle providing? I now have all the Lincoln books that I could want until the next one comes out. Then an American Gardener sampler, and The Lost Prince by Francis Hodgson Burnett. A little Ruritanian fiction there. So there you go. That is my, I'm stocking up. And who knows what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow I will probably be making a video while the snow is blazing down outside. We'll see. We'll see what kind of a thing we get. This will be the last pre-storm video that I make, and then tonight all hell breaks loose. We shall see. We'll see which models are correct. Because one of the models that I'm following says that Boston could get 18 inches. 18 inches of snow. We shall see. I will wrap this up for now and pray that it isn't rattling all throughout. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.